Continuing on with our NFL divisional previews, the next division we will be going over is in the AFC, the North. And this AFC North is a super fascinating division because there were actually 3 teams in this division that ended up making the playoffs last year. The Pittsburgh Steelers were the team that won this division. They surprised a lot of people last year at this time. There weren't really a lot of people picking Pittsburgh to win the division, but Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Tomlin, and the guys got off to an 11-0 start, and they took it from there. It's now time for my predictions and what I think is going to go down in this AFC North. I will start off with a team that I am predicting to win the division with a record of 12-5, and that is actually going to be, yes, the Cleveland Browns. I am predicting the Cleveland Browns to win the AFC North with a record of 12-5 right now in Vegas. Their over-under win total is 10.5. I will go over that. They are plus 125 to win the division. Baltimore is slightly favored ahead of Cleveland at plus 105. I think Cleveland, you could make the argument that from a 1 to 53 perspective, they have the most talented roster in the NFL. I'll start off by saying this. I have been so impressed with the job Kevin Stefanski has done since he got to Cleveland. And it's only been 1 year. I totally understand that. He has 1 playoff win. He still has a lot to prove. But let's keep in mind, guys, this is the Cleveland Browns, a team that over the last 20 years before last season were not only bad, but the laughing stock of the NFL. They were terrible. They couldn't get out of their own way, whether it was going 0-16 for a season and releasing all of the beer, all of the quarterbacks that they've had and that have failed over the last couple years. And it's crazy because Baker Mayfield, in that one season under Freddie Kitchens, was maybe looking like he was going to go down that road. But Cleveland said no. We see that Baker Mayfield, the quarterback that we took number 1 overall, was just in a terrible position to succeed. So what did they do? They got a new coach that is offensive-minded. They got a good offensive line. They've been developing that for the last couple of years. They draft Jedrick Wills from Alabama, bring in Jack Conklin, the free agent from Tennessee, and they just continue to collect talent on the defensive side of the ball. Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward are 2 ballers that could impact the game. They also will get healthier this season on the defensive side of the ball by bringing back Greedy Williams and Grant Delpit, 2 kids from LSU that were not able to play last year. I think you could expect both those guys to make an immediate impact right away. And they will also be bringing in Jadeveon Clowney, who, look, he was a bust in Tennessee. I totally understand that. But I actually do think in this kind of defense, with the amount of talent around him, when all of the pressure is not necessarily on Clowney to step up and make the game-breaking play, I actually do think this could work. They also bring in John Johnson and Troy Hill, 2 members of the Rams secondary from last year, members of the best defense in football last year, and I think this Browns defense is loaded. And they know how to run the ball. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt is one of the more dynamic duos in the NFL when it comes to running the ball. And they are doing it behind just an elite offensive line. My guy, Wyatt Teller, know that name, was one of the most improved players in the NFL last year. And he literally became one of the best offensive guards in football and a game changer. The one thing, if I'm Cleveland, that I want to monitor going into this season is the elephant in the room. It's Baker Mayfield and his future. If you saw earlier this offseason, Josh Allen, who was another quarterback drafted in that same 2018 draft class with Baker Mayfield, he got paid. He got a record-setting deal. Lamar Jackson, he is a guy that even though he hasn't gotten paid yet, a lot of people, including myself, are expecting Baltimore to ultimately deliver on a big-time contract for our guy Lamar. But then there's Baker Mayfield, who did, I will admit, a really good job last year. I think last year he proved a lot of doubters wrong. However, I do think that last year, watching Cleveland, there were some flashes where I would see Baker, and I'm just like, wow, this guy is making all the throws. He's putting his team in a position to win, and he's just making some tough throws that not a lot of other quarterbacks in the league can make. This season, I want to see more of that, and it's going to be interesting to see where exactly Kevin Stefanski draws the line, because I think you could really make the argument that Cleveland is at their best when they're running the ball behind that great offensive line, when their defense is making plays, and when they really don't need their quarterback to sit there and deliver and bail their team out. Not a lot of other teams could say that. But when you have Baker Mayfield and this team is winning, but it's not really because of him, it's because of everyone else, and he's just not messing it up, where exactly do you make the decision to pay him? And I think for that reason, this contract situation with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland is so interesting. Right now, if you have a team around Baker Mayfield that doesn't have an elite offensive line and doesn't have really good weapons like Cleveland does and a really good defense and an elite coach, is Baker Mayfield going to be able to be worth that money long term? That is the one question I have. But to be honest, Cleveland may not have a choice. I don't really know where else they would go at quarterback from here. I think this is such a big season for Baker Mayfield, and I do think he's going to deliver. I do think the Browns team around him is going to deliver. I will have Cleveland winning the AFC North with a record of 12-5. Coming in second, I will have this team as a wild card with a record of 11-6. That will be Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. And I'll say this about Lamar Jackson. He is certainly not the perfect quarterback. He has his issues. He has not been able to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in a game yet, and I think we know why. He hasn't really shown us that ability on 3rd and 8 when your quarterback needs to sit in the pocket, avoid pressure, and make a big throw. Like, yes, he hasn't showed us he could do that yet. But at the same time, I don't understand why every time Lamar Jackson is brought up in conversation, we immediately just jump right to his weaknesses. This guy, in 2+ years as an NFL starting quarterback, all he has done is win football games, and I respect that. I respect the Ravens coach, John Harbaugh, deciding to zig 2 years ago and build this offense around Lamar Jackson and the running game when the rest of the league was zagging, and decided to build their offenses around the passing game and the explosive deep balls downfield. That is not the Ravens, and I think they've done a really good job building their team towards that offense and building their offense around that power run scheme. Ronnie Stanley should hopefully be back healthy and ready to go at left tackle. And they also made a really big effort to try to improve the weapons around Lamar Jackson. I remember I was really high on Baltimore going into the playoffs last year, and they really disappointed me in that Saturday night game against the Buffalo Bills. And I think Bills defensive coordinator Wesley Frazier did a really good job in that game, looking at Lamar Jackson straight in the eye and saying, you are not going to beat us throwing the football. Or running the football. You have to beat us throwing the football. If you want to beat us and if you want to score points, you're going to have to sit in the pocket and make all of the throws. And ultimately, Lamar Jackson couldn't do that. The Bills defense did such a good job containing the run, and it was obvious to me while watching that game, the Ravens just didn't have enough offensive weapons to throw the ball to. Now, I don't necessarily know how much of an impact bringing in guys like Sammy Watkins and Rashad Bateman, the rookie out of Minnesota, who is already banged up, I don't necessarily know how much of an impact that's going to make, but at the same time, I think the Ravens are a playoff team. They are a team that has won during the regular season over the last couple of years, and they deserve respect for that. There were some reports brought up earlier in the offseason by some guys around the NFL GM circle that many NFL GMs think that this is finally going to be the year teams are going to be able to figure out and stop Lamar Jackson. I don't buy it. He is the best running quarterback I've ever seen. Watch his highlights in that game in the playoffs against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, that touchdown run that he had not only changed the game, but he literally had other defenders on an NFL playoff defense looking foolish. No one could touch him, and this guy's just a dynamic playmaker. He knows how to win games. The Ravens are such a well-run organization under Steve Bisciotti, their owner. They know how to win games. I love the Baltimore Ravens. They will be my team to come in second place with a record of 11-6. My team in third place. This is going to be an eye-opener because I think that the 2021 season is going to be the first season under head coach Mike Tomlin that the Pittsburgh Steelers are actually going to finish with a losing record. Yes, I have the Steelers with a record of 8-9, finishing in third place in the AFC North. Right now, the Steelers plus 350 to win the division, and their over-under win total is 8.5. I am going to take the under on the Steelers win total, and I will tell you why. Last year, I think to start the season, the Pittsburgh Steelers maxed out. Ben Roethlisberger looked healthy. He looked good. He was ready to go, playing behind a solid offensive line with good weapons and one of the best defenses in the NFL. And this year, they bring in a guy like Najee Harris from Alabama, who is going to be an impact playmaker at running back. I have really liked everything that I have seen from this kid, Pat Freiermuth, the tight end from Penn State, second-round pick. I think he is going to be a really good player. He catches everything. If you throw that dude the ball anywhere near him, especially in the end zone, the tight end from Penn State, he is going to come down with it and make the play. However, the Steelers' offensive line right now is one of the worst units in the league, and I'm not even kidding when I say that. They lost a lot from last year's offensive line, and I totally understand. Guys like Marquise Pouncey and Al Villanueva, David DeCastro, they certainly weren't ideal last year. When the Steelers collapsed and were losing all of their games late in the season, including that playoff game to Cleveland and the Monday night game against Cincinnati, their offensive line could not block. And when you didn't have a quarterback that could move, Ben Roethlisberger looked done those last 4 games of the season. I wouldn't be shocked if he starts off this season well. He is in pretty good shape. But the problem is, Ben, it's too late, bro. Where was this 4 or 5 years ago? That's my issue here. If Ben Roethlisberger wants to get in some great shape right now, that's fine. But I just don't know how much football he has left, especially playing behind this offensive line. I think the Steelers' defense is really good. But this TJ Watt situation is concerning as well. You drafted TJ Watt in the 20s. He was a late pick for late first-round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Steelers have done a really good job developing him into as good of a player as they could have expected or that they could have hoped. If you told the Pittsburgh Steelers on draft day that TJ Watt would become the player he is right now, the Steelers would have signed that twice and maybe would have traded up to take him earlier if they had to. But why aren't you paying this guy? He is one of the only natural pass rushers in the league that has the ability to get to the quarterback with his eyes closed. It doesn't take much. He has that ability to just wreck a football game, and he is so important to the Steeler defense. When you combine him with Cam Hayward and Minkah Fitzpatrick in the secondary, the Steelers are usually a very well-run team, but over the past couple of seasons, they've made some head-scratching decisions that haven't been major, like they haven't killed the franchise in any way, but I do think when you look at what this team's ultimate goal is to get to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, especially after all of the past seasons with heavy expectations that they haven't been able to deliver on, I do think Mike Tomlin is an overrated coach. I really do believe that. There have just been way too many games over the past couple years that the Steelers should have won and quite frankly just didn't come ready to play. And when I look at this roster and some of their weaknesses, especially on the offensive line and maybe at quarterback, I just don't trust Mike Tomlin as a coach that's going to be able to get this team over the hump. I know that he hangs his hat high on the fact that he has never had a losing season as head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But considering the talent on his team and considering the quarterback he's had, yes, that's impressive. But after a while, how long could you really use it when you haven't been winning playoff games? And when you're the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, having a winning record is great. But after a while, you could only do that so many times if you're not going to win in the playoffs before the fans ultimately get a little tired of you. And Mike Tomlin did a good job for the first 10, 11 games of the season last year. I think the year prior to that, when Ben Roethlisberger got hurt and Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges became the Steelers' starting quarterback, that was a good season for Mike Tomlin. Up to the fact that they lost their final 3 games, they were all favored in, and that's what cost them a playoff spot. If I'm a Steeler fan, there's just been a lot of inconsistency over the past couple of years, and really I expect that to continue. I have the Steelers missing the playoffs, finishing 3rd in the AFC North with a record of 8-9. And finally, the team I have finishing in 4th place in this AFC North with a record of 4-13 is the Cincinnati Bengals. I will admit, I am not too high on the Cincinnati Bengal team right now, and it starts off with their head coach. Zach Taylor hasn't really shown me anything over the last couple years to make me believe in this Bengal team, right? There have been plenty of teams since Zach Taylor has taken over head coach of the Bengals that didn't necessarily have the best talent in the world, but still were out here finding ways to win. Like, I saw Brian Flores lead a Miami Dolphin team that early in the season we thought was tanking for Tua and could have been one of the worst teams in NFL history. I just thought Brian Flores was in such an impossible spot to begin with, and now 2 years later, he has his team knocking on the door of the playoffs. He led his team into New England with Ryan Fitzpatrick beating Tom Brady in his final regular season home game in Foxborough, and I'm not expecting the Bengals to do that. But I just want to see this team win some games they aren't necessarily expected to win, and they haven't really done that. And the Jamar Chase chatter during the preseason, it's concerning. This dude can't catch a pass, and he is a top 5 pick. And not to mention, you drafted this guy over Penei Sewell, who I admit hasn't really been looking great so far in camp for Detroit. But at the same time, your offensive line is super, super sketchy right now. And your quarterback just tore his ACL last season, and it's a miracle, quite honestly, that he's back and should be ready to go. But if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, you are a team that spent a lot of money in the offseason, and I understand you bring in guys like Xavier Suafilo and Riley Reif on the offensive line, and you're hoping that can help things, but I just don't think it is when you really could have had a guy like Penei Sewell, just a really good athlete and a guy that a lot of people are projecting to be one of the better offensive linemen in the NFL next year. I didn't love that pick by Cincinnati. They do get Jonah Williams back, the tackle they took a couple years ago from Alabama who got hurt last year. Hopefully that will make an impact, but at the same time, I just think this Bengals offensive line is so bad, it won't really matter, and I'm worried for Joe Burrow, and I just don't trust Zach Taylor as a head coach. Now, the Bengals did spend some money on defense, bringing in guys like Chidobe Awuzie, bringing in a guy like Trey Hendrickson and Larry Ogunjobi from New Orleans and Cleveland, respectively, but they had Carl Lawson, one of the better pass rushers in the league last year, one of the better pass rushers who was on the market, who ended up going to the Jets. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but it's going to be interesting to see what does that money do? Does signing a guy like Trey Hendrickson or Ogunjobi, does that make a legitimate difference for the Cincinnati Bengals team? And can those moves on defense be good enough to elevate that team to win some games? To be honest, I don't think so. This division is tough. I have the Bengals finishing last place in the AFC North with a record of 4-13, and I do think there is going to be a very good chance that Zach Taylor gets fired after this season. I believe in Joe Burrow. I think he could be a good NFL starting quarterback. He showed me some good signs last year. I think he'll put up decent numbers. He has some good weapons thrown to Boyd and T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, even Auden Tate is a receiver I like. But at the same time, I just don't see how this team is going to win football games the way it is currently constructed. I have the Bengals finishing in last with a record of 4-13. So to recap my AFC North standings, Cleveland, my first place team with the record of 12-5. Baltimore, second place, 11-6. Pittsburgh in third, 8-9. Bengals fourth, 4-13. And to recap the AFC, my 7 playoff teams: Kansas City is the 1 seed, 14-3. Cleveland, 12-5. AFC North champions is my 2 seed. The Miami Dolphins, surprise team, will be my 3 seed at 12-5. Colts, 4 seed. AFC South champs, 10-7. And then my 3 wild cards: Buffalo, 5 seed at 11-6. Baltimore, 6 seed, also at 11-6, and the Los Angeles Chargers, my 7 seed, with a record of 10-7. Those are my 7 playoff teams in the AFC. Let's move on to the NFC.